There's a cynical feeling saying I should give up. You said everything you'll ever say. There's a moment of...
I think Cynical is a really great opening track for the album. When we wrote that song, John was like, oh, this should be the first track on the record, and it really made sense. I think it's the little bass intro, the sad kind of bass intro with dark lyrics happen. And then Travis's drums kick in and then the guitars, and Travis is doing this big giant drum roll, and he's recording this big giant drum roll, and he messes up and he goes, ah! And then we kept that part in. And so when you hear Travis scream, it's in frustration, and then the song kicks off, and it's just a really kick-ass song.
Bored to Death was the first song we wrote with John, and I think it started, John and Mark started working on it together. That's kind of what the genesis of it was. And Mark wrote the first verse, and John sent me in to sing. You know, I was listening to Mark do his vocal, and I just started writing kind of an extension of what Mark was saying, what that meant to me. My perception of it was something that it made perfect sense to me, and the continuation of it in the second verse was some things that I had gone through, some things that I was going through, and you know, from going from a really kind of rough time in my life to going through this really amazing time in my life now, and the kind of more about not necessarily the amazing time, but the transition into it, and sort of from my point of view, it's easier to say I'm bored or I'm angry, or anything is much easier to say than I'm hurt.
She's Out of Her Mind is one of the most deceptively simple songs on the record. When you listen to it, it's just very immediate, it's very catchy, it's very poppy. It's probably the song that we worked on the most because we kept trying to beat each successive chorus. We would write a chorus and go, oh, that's really cool. And we'd come back the next day and go, no, let's try and beat that chorus. And then we'd write a different chorus. And then we'd come back in the next day and say, no, let's try and write an even better chorus than that. And we kept revisiting that song. And so the song that you hear now is a combination of probably 4 different chorus ideas, which makes it so cool because it has so many hooks in it, it's so catchy. But it was a lot of work writing that song, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Every day we'd go into the studio, we weren't really sure what we were going to come up with, what kind of song. We had so many different kinds of songs, but Los Angeles was the first kind of departure from what was, I think, what people would think of when they think of Blink, you know, and in a great way. It still sounds like Blink, but it has this real grit and grind. I mean, you know, the imagery, of course, in the song, it's describing what I think of. There's like, there's a gun club in downtown Los Angeles that I go to pretty regularly, and to get there you have to drive through Skid Row and 5th Street, and it's on 6th Street, and it is dark and dirty down there. And that juxtaposition of the fame and the, you know, the beauty of Los Angeles and the sunset and the palm trees, and then these just decrepit souls that, you know, this hopelessness, and those two things kind of together that makes Los Angeles what it is. I think that song represents that quite well, and was a really cool departure, but also made so much sense for this record.
Sober is a song that we wrote with Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy. And the first verse of that song is autobiographical about Matt from his days as a bicycle messenger in Chicago. And the second verse of that song is a fantasy story. Doesn't exist, but it's kind of like a Sid and Nancy romance. 2 lost souls who only have one another, and they're kind of lost in the world. And Patrick was the one that had the line, I'm a dandelion, you're a 4-leaf clover, which I think is a really clever lyric.
I wanna see some naked dudes.
Built This Pool is a song that I had been working on for years. As funny as that is to say, it's totally true. It's just something that I made up years ago and just would play as a joke every now and then. And we were in between takes at the studio, and I played it for John, and he started laughing, and he's like, "We have to record that right now," and so we recorded it. And the funny thing is at the end of the song when Travis goes, "Is that really it?" Travis didn't know what was happening because he would come in and had played drums on a different song, and then John said, "I'm going to play you this 4-bar rock song. You get a 4 count in and then wrap it up." And so Travis gets 4 counts in and he starts playing along, and the song ends and he finishes his drums and he goes, "Is that really it?" And we kept that in as well.
Lots of Travis vocals on this record.
Yeah.
2, in fact. No Future, you know, that song is, I felt like, the meaning behind it, I mean, to me, when I hear that song, it's almost like kind of like two different songs, like anything, verse, chorus, you know, are kind of definitely different, you know, there should be a dynamic there. But I remember writing that song, working on that song, all of us together, and the verse happening, and then when we went into the chorus, I think it was John, like, took it just to this weird, like, left turn that was almost like, I mean, of course, No Future reminds me of the Sex Pistols immediately, which that was one of my first loves. I love the Sex Pistols, still love the Sex Pistols. And I feel like, though the song doesn't sound like that and there's no Jonesy guitar happening, it harkens back to the beginnings of punk rock and Vivienne Westwood and everything that happened in Camden, and love that song.
Home is Such a Lonely Place, I think, is one of the high points of the album. It's a really dark song, but it's a really soulful, earnest, heartfelt, heartbreaking song. And that song was written, I got to the studio and I was talking with John, and we were kind of commiserating on how sad we were going to be when our children grew up and left home and went out and started building their own lives. And you're happy for them. You're happy for people to go and find themselves and become themselves, but as a parent, you're sad to have your kid go away. And it has one of my favorite lyrics on the record, but one of the darkest, which is "Home is such a lonely place," which I think, I don't know, I really like that lyric because when you think about home, it's supposed to be safe and comforting and fulfilling, but sometimes it can also be the worst place in the world.
Kings of the Weekend. You know, we had a really good problem with this record in that when we were done writing, we had, you know, 20, almost 30 songs, and it was one of the hardest parts of it. And in a good way, we had to whittle things down, and there were some, you know, different versions. Like, we were all kind of like putting them in different orders and playing around with it and kind of emailing ideas back and forth, and or discussing them in the studio, of course. And that was one that I had very little to do with writing-wise. I think I wrote some guitar stuff, but as far as lyrics and melodies and stuff, I had so much fun singing it because it was something I would have never thought to write. And I could very easily be a fan of and be kind of, you know, on the outside looking in, even though, you know, I played guitar on it, sang it. I just loved the song. When I came in that morning and heard it, I was like, this song should definitely make the record. And, you know, I just kind of let it marinate and see what everybody thought. And I'm really happy that it made the cut.
I think Teenage Satellites is the last song that we wrote for the record, or the next to last song. And that song started off, I was in the studio by myself, and I had Matt's guitar. Matt had a new guitar made that had gotten delivered to the studio, and I was playing on it, and I was just playing this just one octave chord, just and John walked in the studio and he goes, "What are you playing?" I said, "I don't know, I just made it up." And he goes, "Okay, cool." And he got behind the board, and then we plugged it in, and he's hit record, and we just started building it from there. And
John.
Yeah, very John. What's that? What's that? Oh, that's cool. Let's record that. Let's do that right now and build a song around it. And it was one of those songs that came together very quickly. And I like the spirit of the song. I like the sentiment of the songs. I like the lyrics. I think that it's a very, I don't know, it's one of those songs that, like, when you hear it, you want to go out and conquer the world.
Left Alone, that was another song to me. I mean, you know, I'm such a huge fan of this record, and to me, front to finish, I really love every song for different reasons. Left Alone, early on, I thought was a contender for a single. Again, so hitty, so immediate and huge, and I really dig, like Travis's drumming on that song especially was just classic Travis Barker. It's like, you know, the whole thing is, I mean, the whole record, there's so many parts where I'm like, oh, the like kids that play drums are gonna learn that fill. They're gonna have to learn that fill, or like, you know, that drum part in that song too. I'm like, that all the drummer kids are gonna be, you know, just, they're all gonna have to learn it. It's classic. And then up on top of that is just a really huge catchy song that I thought this could be the single too. That was, in my opinion, it was like that song and Left Alone and Bored to Death. Kind of similar songs, but also when you listen to them next to each other, very different.
Dear head, shut up. I can't listen no more. It's late, so shut up.
Rabbit Hole is a song that it encompasses everything that I love about Blink. It's fast, it's catchy, it's fun, the lyrics are a little bit dark, and it'll never ever be a single, but I think that it's a song that we will probably play live for the rest of our lives. It's just one of those songs that I think is going to really translate well in concert.
There were songs that were left off the record, not because they weren't great, but because they would change kind of the temperature, not kind of completely change the temperature of the record and what kind of record it would be. It's just like a, you know, a different, just a kind of a taste thing. And San Diego, I don't know why, but I was concerned it was going to get cut, and I'm really glad it didn't. I think it's such a great song, and there's some mixed feelings about San Diego within the band. I won't go into specifics, but I think it expresses those feelings without, you know, there are, you know, obviously the band, you know, originates from San Diego, and the fans there are just, you know, amazing. So it's not a diss to the city, but it's sort of like, if I, you know, can say so, similar to me, like having memories of Chicago. That's where I'm from. And, you know, coming into Blink and having a song that's sort of like a past life type of tune that's so anthemic, but also kind of melancholic and adds this new kind of turquoise flavor to the record that I'm a big fan of. I love that song.
Turquoise flavor.
Yeah, like kind of dirty ocean flavor.
Cool.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters, we wrote very early on in the process. It was this bass thing that I had come up with, and we wrote the song around it. And for whatever reason, John got it in his head that that the bass part and the drum part together made it sound like country punk. Remember, like the whole country punk thing? Cool. Yeah. And so we changed it slightly, and it's a really cool, fast song with a cool bass part and cool drum parts, and will be a live fun song to play live as well.
California, that song, I envision we're about to embark upon this big North American tour when we get back from this trip, and I listened to that song when we were, you know, kind of like had a rough mix of it or whatever. We were compiling the songs, And I just have this vision of playing that song when we get back to Los Angeles to end the tour. Just, you know, lighters in the air. Like that song, every time I hear it, I get a lump in my throat. And, you know, being a Chicago boy, I'm a proud Chicagoan, but I'm also a very thankful Californian. So that love song to our beautiful state, you know, I'm really, I think a lot of it has to do with being, playing with Blink now and everything that's happened in my life. That as a kid, I would go to Los Angeles and be like, I want to play in a punk band and live on Melrose and, you know, shop at Retail Slut every day and, you know, like hang out with Social Distortion. And now that's what I do pretty much. So it's kind of a dream come true kind of thing. And it being a slower song, but still very powerful, it means a lot to me.
Bohemian Rhapsody is a song. I went out to get coffee with John one afternoon, and he said, "You guys need to write another joke song. Do you have any like?"
That's a good John.
Yeah. He has just this incredible energy about him, and he said, "Do you have any other thoughts like built this pool or whatever?" And I said, "Oh well, I thought of this funny thing the other day, that there's something about you I can't quite put my finger in." And he goes, "Oh gosh, that's great. We gotta get back to the studio right now." And so we rushed back to the studio and picked up a guitar and wrote this thing, and it was done in half an hour.